I have been using this filament dryer here for a couple of months now, and I think that's enough time for me to give you my thoughts on filament dryers overall. If you're not aware, a filament dryer is nothing more than a purpose-built heater, and the reason why we heat the filament is to get rid of the moisture that it absorbs over time. And the fact that it absorbs moisture over time is why usually when you buy a spool of filament, it comes in that vacuum sealed bag. So what are the actual impacts of printing with moist filaments? It really depends on a lot of factors. What type of plastic you're trying to print, what brands made the plastic, because the composition may vary, what color, for some reason it influences as well. I've been 3D printing stuff for many years at this point, and I've only recently got myself a filament dryer, and that already kind of means that you don't actually need one. But it also begs the question, why did I spend the money to get one, right? Here we have two spools of filament from two different brands and two different colors. Most of the time, I have been printing with this black PLA from this local manufacturer. And to be honest, I have left them out in the open for the longest time, and I barely noticed any difference in terms of like print quality and so on. So that's why I haven't acquired a filament dryer so far. On the other spool is a white PLA from another brand. It's also a local manufacturer. However, their filament becomes very brittle once it absorbs moisture, and the print quality really suffers. So why is it bad when your filament becomes brittle? Well, it has to be pulled by an extruder. If it's a direct drive, it's not as bad. If it's a Bowden style printer, it's probably way worse. But anyway, what might happen is that your filament will break inside the Bowden tube, or even worse, inside the extruder, instead of being pulled. And that's a real pain in the ass to clean afterwards. And not only that, when your filament is moist, once it reaches the nozzle and the temperature is high, the water will boil. And that'll cause a lot of print artifacts like stringing and like little gaps in the models. If we are talking about other filaments, I wouldn't say they become as brittle as PLA from my experience, but they are quite sensitive to moisture in terms of print quality. So if you're trying to print with PETG or TPU and you make sure to dry your filament before you print, you'll notice that the end result is much better than if you try to print with moist filament. It will work as long as the filament doesn't break in the middle, as I mentioned with the brittle PLA. But you probably have to do a lot of post-processing to clean the print up. That wouldn't be necessary if you just dried your filament first. But do you actually need a filament dryer for that? Not really. Before I had this filament dryer, I just heated up my build plate. And of course that only works if you have an enclosed printer. And left the spool in the printer for, 10 hours or something. Occasionally switching the side that was on the build plate. And that seemed to do the trick, but I'm sure it wasted a lot of energy and it took much longer than needed. Another thing that you might do is put your filament in an oven, especially if you have a finer control over the oven temperature. Because for example, for PLA, the temperature that you want to aim for is around 50 degrees Celsius, which is quite low for an oven. So be mindful of that. I have seen people on YouTube that adapted food dehydrators to use as filament dryers. That works fine, I guess. If you have an old one lying around or you find one really, really cheap, that's an option. But since I didn't have one lying around, I just went ahead for the purpose-built option. And I must say it has some advantages over the other options. First and foremost, since it's a very small chamber, it heats up pretty fast and doesn't waste any energy in that regard. It will waste a little bit of energy because this specific one isn't sealed. So even if you leave your spool inside the filament dryer, if it's turned off, it will get moist again. And it also has temperature presets for all sorts of materials that you might want to print with. So it makes things very handy. And then you just need to let it know for how long you want it to dry your filament. And you can see how humid it is inside the chamber through the screen. For quick prints, even like an hour or two of drying before printing really helped. But for longer prints, I would say 8 hours is more aligned with what you need. By the way, this is the Creality Space Pi filament dryer. It has an outlet at the front. If you want to connect a Bowden tube and print right out of the dryer, that's an option. It also has a small hole in the back cover for the moisture to leave the chamber. I quite like the design, it matches the K1 Max design. It makes a little bit of noise, not much. And I think that's it for today. If you want to get yourself one of these, the link will be down in the description. It will probably be an affiliate link, so if you use that one, I will probably get a commission. You won't pay anything extra for it. But that's it for today. See you guys next time.